afternoon, you're watching Grampian Television. Now Nicholas Owen and Carol Barnes present the lunchtime news from ITN.
Hello, this is the lunchtime news from ITN.
The main developments so far. Over 20,000 defence jobs are expected to go this afternoon, the bases which are likely to face the chop. More misery at the dentist. How much will you have to pay?
Also among today's headlines, 22 die as an old people's home collapses in Italy. More are still buried. And tension as the Germans invade Paris. But this time it's to celebrate with the French, not to occupy them.
The government will announce the most far-reaching cuts and changes to the armed forces for years in the Commons this afternoon. The proposals, known as Frontline First, will lead to what the Defence Secretary Malcolm Rivkin calls significant job cuts. But he says Britain's fighting strength will be improved. Up to 19,000 military and civilian jobs look set to be axed or privatised. The main losers are likely to include RAF bases like Finningley, the Rosyth naval base and the supplies depot at Topsham near Exeter. And many high street recruitment offices and military hospitals are likely to close too. The government sweetening the pill for some. New defence work will benefit naval bases at Faslane and Portsmouth and British Aerospace at Warton in Lancashire.
At the naval base at Devonport this morning and at service establishments up and down the country, they were asking the question, will it be us? Most of the rumoured 20,000 job cuts are likely to fall amongst support staff.
It's bound to happen, isn't it? Yeah, I think it's disgusting, especially coming from a Tory government.
I think we're all resigned to the fact that it's going to happen. There's not much we can do about it. I don't think anybody likes it very much, but there we are.
The future of some of the most famous service institutions like the Royal Navy Staff College at Greenwich is in question. Recruitment offices on Britain's high streets may disappear, the spending cuts aimed at areas well behind the front line, according to the Ministry of Defence. Areas like the Territorial Army too, possibly facing cutbacks. But while Defence Secretary Malcolm Rivkin was getting agreement for the cost savings at Cabinet this morning, he was also getting the OK for some new spending. Equipment orders are in the pipeline, including its believed new Challenger tanks. But opposition parties claim these orders are sweeteners to soften the blow of the cuts elsewhere.
I think what you'll hear today is an effort by Mr. Rivkin to persuade the public, and indeed the House of Commons, that some of the things that he's confirming, the orders that he's confirming, are new. But the truth is, virtually every one of them is something to which the government was already committed.
It's a total smokescreen, camouflage to cover the cuts which he has tamely accepted from the Treasury.
Some Tory backbenchers question the wisdom of such a wide-ranging review.
What we have to be certain of is that our capability in defence does not mismatch with foreign policy, and that is the grave danger that we're in. And I think a period of calm now and no further deep cuts or any cuts into defence are necessary.
Mr. Rivkin's challenge to persuade his own party as well as the opposition that he won't have to wield the spending axe again and repeat the agony next year. Hugh Pym, ITN, Downing Street.
The Rosyth naval base is expected to get a partial reprieve in the government's defence review. It was thought that the base in Fife would be closed completely with a loss of 1,400 civilian jobs. Now Rosyth's role is expected to be reduced to that of a support base, saving 600 jobs.
Since 1916, they've been sailing into Rosyth. This afternoon, workers at the naval base will finally be told which way they're heading, towards a secure future, oblivion, or somewhere in between. Workers arriving this morning were insisting the base must remain fully operational and not be reduced to a care and maintenance role.
Partial closure just means closure. The emphasis is on the word closure.
I'm expecting the naval base to be cut and most jobs to disappear. Only a lot of jobs to be retained, but not worth bothering about.
Anything that they do to sort of save jobs here, I think, is a political decision to save face. And I think that those jobs will probably go at some time in the future.
For the nearby town of Dunfermline, the closure of the base could put 1 in 4 men out of work. Hundreds of small firms depend on the naval base for their survival.
The figure this morning was mentioned something like 500. Now that's 500 families affected.
So and then, of course, it also has the spin-off effect, or the knock-on effect, of those who were employed by subcontractors. And again, the figure was something like 8,000.
At the gates of Rosyth this morning, unintentional irony in an area from which so much of the economic lifeblood has already been drained. The financial and strategic arguments have been put by both sides. In just 3 hours' time, the people here will finally learn their fate. Glenn O'Glaser, ITN, Rosyth.
Well, in Rosyth now is Walter Strachan, who's the trade union spokesman at the base. Mr. Strachan, from what we gather so far, it looks as though a partial reprieve is on the cards. Is that going to bring smiles to at least some people?
We have heard nothing at all about a partial reprieve. The Ministry of Defence line is still the same. There's been no comment made, and there won't be any comment made until announcement.
So what is the thinking there at the moment? If, as we say, some jobs are retained, are there still fears about the long-term future of Rosyth?
What we've asked for all along was a concrete commitment from this government about the future of the naval base. There can be no such future if Rosyth Naval Base loses minor war vessels.
But the situation surely is that there have got to be cuts made somewhere. Do you think that it's possible to keep Rosyth going in the way it is at the moment?
I think the recommendations, some of the recommendations which was made in the fourth option made quite a good case for the retention of Rosyth as a naval base. Bear in mind, the same government in 1992 said that Rosyth had a long-term future as a minor war vessel base. Nothing has changed since then, apart from the Treasury riding shotgun over the Ministry of Defence.
What about the campaign to try to keep the yard going? Do you think that should have sort of got into gear earlier? Could more have been done?
Nothing more could be done than what's been done, but the campaign will continue long after the announcement is made. Bear in mind, you've still got a consultation period. We have no intentions of sitting back and allowing our base to be run down or closed.
So you're saying that even if the worst, if there was a really big job cuts, you'll go on fighting?
Of course we will. The Fife community depends too much on us not to. Bear in mind that when you're talking about the jobs, this 400 or 500 factitious number that's getting thrown about, that doesn't to mention nothing about the 2,000 naval personnel that would also leave the base. If you take 2,000 naval personnel with their families, that's an awful lot of spending money going out to the local community, which we cannot stand for.
Mr. Strachan, thank you very much.
Right, thank you.
The teenage girl who disappeared on a trip to the Czech Republic to visit a pen pal has turned up safe and well. An international search was launched after 18-year-old Nicola Whelan disappeared on Monday. She contacted her parents this morning.
Nottingham police say they have fresh video pictures of the woman they want to question in connection with the disappearance 12 days ago of baby Abby Humphreys. Computer experts are enhancing a front view of the woman seen leaving the Queen's Medical Centre with the child 13 days ago.
Every second, a different picture on a different security camera. And now police believe one of the thousands of frames they've been searching through reveals the face of the kidnapper. But the photograph is blurred and of little use unless it can be enhanced by forensic experts.
Tell Karen that her baby is safe.
Appeal number 6 to the kidnapper has had the same disappointing response. Josie Clark pleaded for a phone call confirming her baby niece was in good health. She received 25 calls, most from people expressing sympathy, but several from hoaxers maliciously claiming they had Abby.
Well, Josie was very upset, and of course that anxiety increased throughout the day. She was particularly disappointed that she didn't hear anything from the woman.
One concern detectives have is that by now the kidnapper may well have disguised Abby as a baby boy, dressing her in blue and giving her a boy's name. Just one more theory in what is clearly becoming a very frustrating inquiry for the police. Adrian Britton, ITN, Nottingham.
The government's expected to propose a substantial increase in dentist fees this afternoon. But the Green Paper is expected to recommend that the cost of having a check-up should be reduced. Labour has already condemned the measures as a tax on teeth.
The government's long-awaited plans are expected to centre on preventative dentistry, with a significant reduction in the £3.92 charge for a check-up. But patients may have to pay the full charge for advanced treatment. For instance, a crown, which costs £59.32 on the NHS, could rise to £74.15. A set of dentures, which cost £81.36, could rise to £101.70.
It's likely that there will be a move towards simpler treatments of just simple fillings, extractions and things of this sort. Now this would be sufficient to keep patients pain-free, but but it certainly wouldn't provide the patients with the best that current knowledge is able to provide.
2 out of 5 dentists have left the NHS since the government cut their fees 2 years ago. Ian Massey has stayed in the health service but says it's a struggle to make ends meet. His patients were resigned about the government's proposals.
You just hope and pray when you get in the chair that it's just going to be a check put in a clean, because you know roughly that's going to be what you can afford.
Dentistry is a priority in my life, so whatever the charge is, I would feel disposed to have to pay it.
I believe that we've seen the beginning of the end of NHS dentistry with 700,000 deregistrations, with 2,500 dentists going private. What we needed was crisis measures to overcome the crisis of the government's own making. Instead, we've seen a teeth tax.
The proposals, which also include changes in the way dentists are paid, will go out for consultation, but treatment charges could rise within a year.
Well, earlier I spoke to Tony Kravitz of the British Dental Association at the BDA's headquarters. Did he think the government's proposals would be popular with dentists?
Well, we hope so. They've taken nearly 2 years to consider these proposals, and we're hoping that what they do produce will stem the flow of dentists away from the National Health Service.
It is suggested that the average fee could go up from about £28 to, say, £36, and that the examination fee, there would still be one, but it might be reduced. Does that sound like good ideas to you?
Well, it's not that won't, on its own, won't stem the flow away from the National Health Service. The government is going to have to come up with more proposals than that. We want them to see a positive way forward, so that dentists can look to a very good future within the National Health Service.
Is that just a way of saying that dentists want a lot more money?
No, we want more resource put into dentistry.
Well, resource means money, doesn't it?
Yes, in total we do want more. At the time of our new contract 4 years ago, the government predicted 24 million people would register. Currently, something like over 30 million have registered, and yet the same amount of money is being used for their dental treatment. We would like to see the money put in for 30 million people.
So what is the current effect of all of this? Is it still the case that many dentists are very unwilling to do national health work?
Some dentists find that their costs are so high in the areas in which they practice, they simply can't carry on doing National Health Service dentistry and stay in business. And if the government can't pay for it, then we will see more dentists move away from the National Health Service.
22 people have died and at least 5 are still missing after an old people's home collapsed in Milan. It's not yet clear what caused the disaster, but it's thought there may have been an explosion triggered by a gas leak.
5 elderly people may still be trapped beneath the rubble. 300 rescuers from the emergency services as well as local people are digging with their bare hands in the search for survivors, in fear that mechanical diggers will cause more death and injury. The reinforced concrete building collapsed early this morning whilst the 40 residents were having breakfast in the crowded dining room. One witness said, "I heard an enormous boom, turned round, and the old people's home had gone." Ambulance crews have rescued about 15 people. 7 of them have been taken to hospital. Investigators and staff believe that the explosion may have been caused by a gas leak from drainage pipes under the dining room. With tons of rubble still to clear, the cause and the final death toll will not be known for some time.
British soldiers will not face prosecution for alleged war crimes during the Falklands War. The decision by the Director of Public Prosecutions follows extensive inquiries by the Metropolitan and Military Police. They looked into allegations about members of the Parachute Regiment made in a book written by a former soldier.
The original investigation was prompted by claims of atrocities in a book about the Falklands War by a former member of the Parachute Regiment. In the book, soldiers were alleged to have shot Argentine prisoners of war and cut off their ears as trophies following the battle for Mount Longdon, one of the fiercest of the campaign. Senior officers were said to have witnessed the brutality, but chose to ignore it. Scotland Yard detectives went to Argentina and to the Falklands to investigate, a move condemned by MPs, veterans and war widows who talked of a witch hunt. Today, the Director of Public Prosecutions said there wasn't enough evidence to charge anyone.
I very much welcome this announcement. It is perhaps surprising that we went to such lengths to investigate these allegations in the first place. the House Commons Defence Committee is very concerned about charges which have been brought at different times against servicemen who've been on active service.
Whilst there will be no prosecutions, the Yard inquiry did conclude that at times military discipline during the Falklands War did break down.
The Heritage Secretary Peter Brook today gave the go-ahead for a 5th mainstream TV station, Channel 5. He also cleared the way for the introduction of digital TV. But many areas are expected to have problems receiving Channel 5, and the Independent Television Commission now has to decide whether it is worth advertising the licence.
Rail union leaders meet this afternoon to consider escalating the strike action which has disrupted the rail network for the past 5 Wednesdays. They're expected to consider increasing the strikes to 2 days a week. Our correspondent Mark Webster is outside the union headquarters. Any news, Mark?
Well, I think the important thing is the executive's actually delayed its meeting to this afternoon so that it can consult as widely as possible among the members. Because what they're very much afraid of, obviously, until now, there's been almost 100% support from the 3,000-odd members of the RMT for this dispute. If they do decide to escalate it to 2 days, they want to make sure that the membership will stay solid. Now, in answer to your question, yes, I think there's probably a good chance that they will move to 2 days a week from the week after next. I'm reluctant to put the wind up rail travellers. I think what they're looking at is some way of trying to force rail track's hands and actually get a solution to this dispute. And one way of doing it, obviously, is to increase the number of days they come out.
Well, if they do increase it to 2 days a week, do you think management can get the service going further more than it has done already?
Well, it's interesting. Rail track seems to be taking quite a tough line on this. What they're saying is that they're learning from their experiences and that they hope that if it does, now Tuesdays and Thursdays seem to be the days that are being mentioned for a 2 days a week stoppage. Now, Railtrack seems reasonably confident that they can nonetheless operate a near complete service on the Monday, Wednesday and the Friday. Now, there's always been a fear that if you have Tuesday and Thursday, then Wednesday is effectively taken out too. Now, Railtrack believes that by effective use of their signalling staff, managed in particular, they can minimise the disruption.
Thank you, Mark.
German troops marched through Paris this morning for the first time since the Second World War. In a gesture of European unity, President Mitterrand invited Chancellor Kohl of Germany and a military contingent to join the traditional Bastille Day parade. Not everyone in France was happy with the invitation.
Bastille Day marks the historic events of the French Revolution 200 years ago. Yet today's parade stirred memories of Paris 50 years ago. Next month, President Mitterrand will participate in celebrations to mark the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Paris from the Nazis. Yet today, in an unprecedented ceremony, he welcomed 200 young German soldiers into France's capital. Their 39 armoured vehicles formed part of the Eurocorps contingent, joining up with French, Belgium, Spanish and Luxembourg troops. German soldiers were last seen in Paris in 1944. France's invitation to Germany today comes after Chancellor Kohl was excluded from the D-Day commemorations. But whilst Normandy's events were all about remembering the past, this morning events in Paris were all about looking forward. In a national opinion poll published today, 66% of those questioned approved of the German presence, only 31% disapproved. And the welcome for the visiting Germans was as heartfelt for them as for their own.
I'm not against that they come, because currently we want to build Europe.
I think it's a good thing for the Europe.
It's a good idea because it's a reconciliation between the two nations.
The inclusion of the German troops here today is expected to add to the momentum of the reconstruction of Europe, to draw a line under the Nazi past. It's also hoped that it will welcome a new generation of Germans and mark a new era in Franco-German relations. Penny Marshall, ITN, Paris.
Now, football, and Italian and Brazilian fans are still celebrating today after their teams won through to the World Cup final. In last night's semi-finals, Italy beat the underdogs Bulgaria 2-1 and Brazil beat Sweden 1-0. The final will be on Sunday at the Pasadena Rose Bowl in Los Angeles.
Anyone in Rome last night might be forgiven for thinking Italy has already won the World Cup instead of just reaching the final. The celebrations for their team's victory over Bulgaria lasted long into the night. And once again, Italy's man of the match, Baggio the Brilliant. After getting the first, he made sure of his team's appearance in Sunday's final with another bit of magic. In Coventry, Bulgarian supporters watched their dream of World Cup glory fade away. They'd come hoping to watch another upset, but instead became upset themselves. The other semi-final was an ill-tempered affair, Sweden eventually succumbing to the Brazilians. The only goal 10 minutes from time when Romario, the smallest man on the field, rose above his markers and headed home. Relief for him in a match that had promised so much but produced hardly anything. One man who missed the action, Eric Cantona, Manchester United's French international, who was involved in a fracas with officials in the stadium and left upset before the kick-off. But sweet victory for Brazil. Now they and their exuberant supporters move on to LA and Sunday's final.
The Open Golf Championship got underway at Turnberry today with the Australian holder Greg Norman and Britain's Nick Faldo among the favourites to win. But the day has so far been dominated by the veteran American Tom Watson. Despite just missing this long putt, he's in the clubhouse now 2 under par. Bookies say there's been a late surge of betting for him to win.
Business news, and the food retail giant Tesco has made an agreed takeover bid which will make it the biggest supermarket trader in Scotland. It's to pay £154 million for the struggling Dundee-based William Lowe chain and warns there could be significant job losses. In the city, continued confidence pushed shares upwards. A short time ago, the FT100 index was up more than 22 points. The pound was down nearly 0.5% against the dollar. It was up a pfennig against the German mark.
The main news again, the government will announce the most far-reaching cuts and changes to the armed forces for years in the Commons this afternoon. The proposals will lead to what the Defence Secretary Malcolm Rivkin calls significant job cuts. Nottingham police say they have fresh video pictures of the woman they want to question in connection with the disappearance 12 days ago of baby Abby Humphreys.
And that's it from the Lunchtime News.
We'll be back tomorrow, so join us at 12:30. Till then, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Well, good afternoon. Well, it's taken its time, but the sun is now out over the bulk of England and Wales and should stay that way for most of the afternoon. There are some changes up to the northwest. We have a look at our satellite sequence. Well, there's all the grey cloud across central and southeastern parts. We run the sequence, though. Watch this band of cloud as it begins to push in towards the northwest. That's likely to bring some rain. Now we can follow that band of cloud and rain as we go through this afternoon and through tonight. It'll be pushing across Scotland, beginning to clear away from Northern Ireland by the time the sun goes down. And then by tomorrow, well, it's effectively come to a stop down across southern parts, breaking up by this time though, and it'll be little more than a band of cloud and maybe the odd patch of rain by about this time tomorrow. That's in the future. Let's come back to this afternoon. There's still the odd gloomy patch on that east coast, and it may linger in an odd place right through the day. Best of the sunshine central and southern parts of England and Wales. Here's the band of cloud and outbreaks of rain up to the northwest as we go through this afternoon, pushing in across Scotland, beginning to come out from Northern Ireland and across the Irish Sea, whilst to the west things very slowly beginning to brighten up. Temperatures at the best around 25 Celsius, cooler though on the east coast.
Sponsored by PowerGen, a partner in Kinetica Natural Gas.